Thank you, Director Cote.
Good morning, Klama Penny Cote, Director for Sprout Lake.
Thank you, everyone. Now we have an agenda in front of us. Is there any additions from directors? Seeing none, is there any additions from the corporate officer?
No additions.
Could I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Director Sparrow, second by Director Roth. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Is there any declarations or conflict of interest? Seeing none, we'll go on to the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting of December 10th, 2025. Is there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, could a motion that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on December 10th, 2025 be adopted? Moved by Director Mealy, second by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Now we'll go on to petitions, delegations and presentations. We have representatives from the Port Alberni Victim Services regarding the ACRD grant and aid funding. We have Board Chair Mary Dolan and board members Diane Maba, Carrie Robertson, Gary Bartlett, and Amelia Hayden. And who's going to be speaking first? Please come on up. We'll just get you to push the microphone on so we can all hear you. Is it good? Go. And just before you start, I just wanted to say that we're having some trouble with our live streaming. If anybody's trying to join online, but they are working on it as we speak. I'm sorry to interrupt. Oh, sorry, it's fixed now. Never mind. Please go ahead and welcome. We're glad to have you here to talk about.
Thank you very much.
Organization.
Okay. So when we first of all, when we had initially asked to come, Tamara Coco, our executive director, also was prepared to come, and she had a medical issue that turned out was taken care of this week. I'm getting echo, so I hear myself twice. Is that?
Yeah, we hear you. Okay.
Okay. No, I hear myself twice.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you sound wonderful.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So this is our board. We're a board of 5 people, and this is our first foray out in the community without Tamara having our back. So so we're a relatively new board. We've 4 of us have been on the board for 4.5 years, and Gary joined us in the last year. And so what I wanted to do was just briefly have each person introduce themselves, and then I'll tell you more about myself, and then we'll get going. I'll go first.
Yeah, you have to use the microphone because you have people watching online.
So I'm Diane Maba, and I have been part of the board for the 4.5 years. And I'm retired 13 years somehow. I don't know how that long has passed. And before that, I worked for the city of Port Alberni as a recreation programmer for, 25 plus years. And I just briefly want to say what a privilege it is to work for the Victim Services Society. They are an incredible staff. They do such important work. They are so highly skilled. And I'm just very pleased to do whatever I can to increase that recognition and make sure they can continue to provide the service that they do in our community.
My name is Gary Bartlett. I've been a member of the community for about 10 years, recently retired from the RCMP. And when I was asked to be part of this board, I saw it as a very important place to put my time. Being newly retired, I'm rather judicious about where I spend my time. And I thought this is a very, very valuable way to work with the community in a way that crosses all strata of socioeconomical, all of those things. And I am very appreciative to be part of this. And I hope that I can learn more and become a valuable member of this team.
Good morning. My name is Amelia Hayden, and I'm a 35-year retired member of the RCMP. Not retired at 35 years, but I've been posted. I was posted here at the end of 2015 So I've lived here for 10 years, worked here for 7. It's been an amazing community. And throughout my service with the RCMP, I have, in the different communities I've been in, always been associated with the Victim Services Unit, not worked for, but associated with through my duties, and have seen the invaluable service that it provides to the members of the community that I've been serving in, and that includes here in Port Alberni. So Tamara asked me, so I've been with the group for about 3 years maybe now. I think it was just after I retired, and like everywhere, it's just super valuable to everyone within all the communities and all the people here. And I just want to do my part to make sure that that is able to continue to its best ability. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Carrie Robertson, and my mind just went blank. I'm a retired teacher. I taught at ADSS, some of you, but don't be intimidated. And since retirement, I was involved with worked part-time with VHA, McLean Mill, and I'm presently a field experience supervisor with VIU student teachers. But I'm retiring at the end of this one for sure. My husband was involved for many, many years with PVS, both as a volunteer and as a board member. And when he decided to step down, he kind of pushed me in, and I've never regretted it. Emotionally, it is such an important thing to be involved in. And like Gary said, I'm fairly selective of what I volunteer my time for, but this one is great. And I'm really pleased to be here today to listen to you people. Thank you.
And I'm Mary Dolan, and I had a private clinical counseling practice here in town for a number of years. And I retired about 7 years ago. And at that time, I wanted to, after taking a bit of a break, I wanted to give back to the community that supported me in my business. And so I joined 2 boards that were important. One was Community Futures, which I'm on now. And they, when I started my business, they provided funds for me to get my business started. And about 7 years later, they provided more funds in order for me to expand my business. And so giving back to them was really important to me. And because counseling is so important, I wanted to do something in terms of mental health, in terms of the time I gave back to the community. And in the counseling practice that I had, one of my contracts was with WorkSafe BC, and they ran the victim services, people who were victims of crime. And so I was a counselor for them. And so with them, and at that time, I got referrals from the employees of the Port Alberni Victim Services and also from criminal injury. So that is became a perfect fit for me. I just wanted to say one of the things that I learned is that with Community Futures, I always thought that economic development was about starting a business and growing businesses. To me, that was economic development. And when I joined the Community Futures Board, it turned out, and I came to realize that it wasn't just about giving people money, but they looked at it from a perspective of what is missing in the community, and then how are we going to solve that problem. And suddenly I just realized, it came to me as I was going along, that a lot of the things we did with Community Futures were really about the mental health of the community, that the economic development, to be strong in a community, you have to have looking after the mental health of the community as well. So it's interrelated. And so I found myself in the best possible place I could be in terms of my retirement. So that is all of us. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to just review the highlights of the letter that I wrote to you to get this meeting going, so we can take it from there. So I'm just going to read a few of the sentences from it. this kind of starts mid first paragraph. Our request for an increase in funding has been denied for the past 2 application cycles, even though we have demonstrated that our staffing levels are significantly lower than similar sized communities and that our workers are paid less, but handling caseloads that are significantly higher and more violent. We realize, though, that our perspective may be limited and comes from looking at the needs of our own organization. We know very little about your board's priorities, constraints, and challenges, and when you consider funding requests. And we are truly interested in learning more about this from you. So we are here to listen. We've all read the grant and aid document, and we thought that we would ask about starting from the approval process that we submit our funding application to you. And then what are your thoughts? What happens from there? But then it occurred to me as I read this document about the grant and aid is that you actually have a meeting by the end of March that determines some financial decisions. So wherever you want to start, we want to listen. I was asked about if we needed flip charts and all kinds of things like that. And I thought, no, you guys are doing all the work. So I'll just sit down and listen. That's it.
Actually, would you like to stay up? Because I'd like to ask the board to ask questions.
Okay.
I just want to say that thank you for the introductions. You obviously have a very, very talented board of directors, and I really appreciate when I see such talented people running an organization. And I'm actually an ex-employee of Community Futures. I worked there for 17 years, and I retired and did this crazy thing like run for city council, and here I am 8 years later. And I appreciate you coming in today, but I think it's really important that we give the board of directors an opportunity to ask you questions, because I'm sure maybe not everyone is exactly clear how important your services are to the community. Okay, if that's okay. So I'd like to open it up to the floor for questions or comments. Director Roth?
I'm just curious if we're expected to be part of the financial part of this program, would we not be involved in the budget process? Like, I don't understand. From what I understand in the past, there was a letter that came through the organization that said that that the government expected the local government to provide a portion of the revenue to victim services. Yet we're not a part of that process. So how can that work? Thank you.
Okay, so and I'll just read it. It's the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General and local governments both come. They expect that both will give 50-50 to our program. Does somebody want to so all victim services we get 83,000, and this is from the Port Alberni policing area, so it's not the West Coast that we're talking about. So it's 50-50. So we get about 86,000, and then the municipalities are expected to match that 50%, but it's not a legal requirement. So in terms of why you're not part of the funding process, I'm not sure where you would fit in. Are you thinking
Well, with the Ministry of Solicitor General and Public Safety, or however
right?
they say, there's a budgeting process. And if we're expected to contribute 50% or 25% or whatever it is, then shouldn't we be a part of that process so we can be part of the decision making? Like I see the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General being part of it and approving it, but we're left out, yet we're expected to contribute. So that's just my thought.
We should never leave the office without Tamara. I just wanted, does anybody else?
I just to say that
Can I get you to come to the microphone, please? Thank you.
Our funding from the province is based on our policing levels, and that's how it is determined across the whole province. And then in terms of the municipalities making a decision that this is an important service that they should be part of, and they fund it at the levels that they can, which I think we listed all the communities across Vancouver Island that we do receive that 50% of, that they match it, basically. Some communities doing more than that. But again, in any of those communities, we would have to check with Tamara, but they do function then as independent entities in terms of how they go about doing the work that they do in their communities. I don't know if that helps at all.
Not really, but it's still good information. But yeah, I was just thinking that if we're expected to be funders, then we should be part of the process, not just hand over public money without being part of how that money is going to be spent.
But I don't think that's their issue. I think that's a provincial issue. So we should be taking that up. with the
No, it's
province.
not. No, it's
Because
there.
if the province is saying that we're expecting to contribute to their organization, that's a crime of the province. Am I correct in saying that?
No.
Yeah.
But what my question back to you, how do you mean being part of the process of the funding? Like, what staff is paid, how much Milo's dog food costs?
Well, like to me,
Yes.
I think you said 83,000 or someone said 86,000. So if we're expected to contribute, then we should be have a say on how that money's being spent. And it's not that we would decide on the hourly rates or anything like that, but what percentage is going to administration, what percentage is going to travel.
Yeah,
What-
fair question. And that's all in our budget. Like we review, what do we review each? Financial reports. We set the budget, but, and I believe Tamara has given that information. She's on speed dial if we need her, and she's not in surgery, but we'll try. So that's a very valid point. And I think when the request goes out, we explain what is needed, but I think we'd be happy to have you part of that process. It's all wide open and nothing's hidden.
Yeah, no, I didn't think anything was
Yeah.
hidden. I just felt that we were left out.
Okay.
And I would think that, we would want to know the revenue and the breakdown of how it's being spent.
Exactly. And that would be in our quarterly reports.
Yeah, I don't know that we would get that, but to be a part of saying yes or no, or maybe can you make an adjustment to this?
Yeah.
Or, can you ensure that the administration costs aren't more than 15%, like that type of involvement?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank
He
you.
will, she'll give it to you.
Thank you.
I think Director Roth is volunteering to be part of your board. We have Director Boyko, then Director Cote, then Director Neely. Please go ahead, Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to a comment you guys just made that your funding levels relate to the policing activity. What part of policing activity are we discussing? Like number of calls, number of members present, homeless counts? Like what number is defining that?
It's the size of the police station. So the number of staff at the police station.
Okay, so if number of calls go up and the same level of staff, your funding stays the same. And
That's right.
Okay.
It's right. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes. And if it went up by 1 or 2, it wouldn't affect the funding. Like if they hired 1 or 2, depending on where we are. But Tamara said that if 1 or 2 was not going to change our 86,000.
Yeah, and I think the Port Alberni policing staff level hasn't changed in quite a while then.
That's true.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Director Cote.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for your presentation. I'm going to bring a history lesson here. Feel like Mike Kakura. Ever since I've been on this board, this is my 22nd budget. There's been a request for grant and aid for this victim services. We've always, right from the beginning, said that this is the provincial service and that the province should be paying for it. That's how it started. And we've consistently paid towards the service. So a question to staff, has the amount that we've been paying towards this changed in the 22 years that I've been on this board? I don't believe that it has increased in those 22 years. I think that this is a really good service. I think that working with the Justice Institute is probably, you're beyond them. You're into the working with victims at the beginning, is my understanding of the services. And that brings me back to staff. When a grant and aid keeps coming back year after year, we've been discussing that, and should that not be a service? So I'd like some answers. Thank you.
Terry has her hand up, so please go ahead, Terry.
Thank you. So the grant and aid for the victim services has been $26,000 since 2015. Prior to that, there was varying amounts, but it's been the same since 2015 at $26,000. It is possible to do a service. Obviously, there is a process to do that, whether that's a alternate approval process or a referendum or something, but there is an ability to do that, but it has never been brought through. It's been discussed numerous times, but it's never been brought through as an initiative through the board table.
I think next we have Director Mimi, Director Jack, then Director Mastanjo. Please go ahead, Director Mimi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming today. I'm just an alternate, so long-time listener, first-time caller kind of here. But in saying that, listening to the director across from Beaver Creek, just a little bit of accountability, but even in saying that, maybe just even an invitation to the table. So maybe at the AGM, and again, I'm an alternate, so I'm kind of throwing everybody else here under the bus, but an invitation to one or more people from the ACRD board to come and be part of that process, and then just the quarterly reports to be given to the board. I think, I'm not trying to speak on behalf of somebody across the way, but I think just the inclusion in the process, and just the AGM's open anyway, so just maybe an invitation to have a representative to come and be part of that process would be a start.
We had originally directed our request for this meeting to your name, board, John Jack.
Oh.
And in our vision of it was, let's have a few board members come, we'll have coffee, and then it's like, oh my God, the whole board. So it's a bit scary for us, but certainly that would be a nice step if you would want to come, or a specific meeting where we get down to the nitty-gritty, but not, everywhere.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Robertson, and it's always Mrs. Robertson for me. It will always be. I ran into Mr. Christensen the other day, and he tried to get me to call him Russ, and I just couldn't do it. So no, even just like I said, the AGM is open. So just having, I'm not saying the whole board can go, but just a suggestion of one person from the board just go and be part of the process, and to report back to the board. And yeah, so that's, again, I'm an alternate, so I wouldn't be doing it, but just a suggestion.
My understanding is that at the end of the funding period, we send out our financial statements to you. So you do have them.
Director Jack, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So I just wanted to maybe add some understanding to how we can navigate more involvement without necessarily being on the board, because being a board member for an organization that's asking for money might make it so that you have to remove yourself from making the decision at this level. What we can do, however, is look at our maybe creating some sort of policy where if we want to see more reporting, we should be clear with every applicant which kind of reports we would like to see. And I mean, that makes us become more like the federal or provincial government. And as an Indigenous government member, I'm very familiar with having to make those kind of reports. So we should be judicious in making sure that they're not onerous, because a lot of these organizations are volunteer. But if it's kind of accountability and transparency that are some of our more important aspects, then that's something that we can look at. One thing that may be interesting, and maybe Danielle or somebody from the staff can tell me off the top of my head or off the top of their heads, is there a difference between joining a society and being able to be at the AGM and being a director for that society? Because I know that being a director means that you may have to remove yourself, but just joining the society and having your say, I think that's okay, but I'm not sure. Thanks.
If I'm understanding correctly, where the legislation steps in and prevents elected members from being active members of other boards is where financial decisions are being made. So well, on two fronts, right? So financial for a board member. So if you're being remunerated, then obviously you have a pecuniary interest and you shouldn't be there. If you're there as a volunteer, but still making decisions on either their budget or our budget, like voting decisions, then it creates a problem. So, but what Director Neely is saying is completely doable. You could have, as long as it's not a quorum, you could have some members of the board at the meeting, listening, and if there are any direct questions, just helping with that, but ultimately not making a decision on behalf of victim services in terms of what their budget should be set at or how money is specifically spent. That is their authority, their decision. But having a good understanding of what Director Roth is saying, like, hey, can we have a better understanding of where things are going? That can certainly be done. It can also be done by simply receiving the reports, which was stated, like we do receive their budgets and we can communicate that out either annually or quarterly, whatever the preference is. So there is a hard wall that we can't cross, but the intent of the legislation, and my understanding, is not to prevent communication. It's to protect authority spheres of those decision-making processes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
I just have a question where it has somebody mentioned about whether this would become one of the services that the regional district provides as opposed to our coming and asking for a grant every year. So I imagine there is a different, if that actually becomes a budget line item in your budget, then again, does that change our reporting, which we'd be very happy to change, by the way, but does that then change our relationship and how we go about it?
I was going to ask Terry to respond, but you want to respond, Daniel? Okay, thank you.
I can respond, and Terry, if there's anything I miss, you can jump in. But if we were to create a service, first of all, the service, we'd have to identify who the participants are. In this case, it would, we'd likely be talking about the valley. If it's larger, we'd be talking about the entire region. And the advantage, of course, is that everyone would have an apportionment formula that each community is putting in through. So we could be a one-stop shop in terms of providing that financial complement. The relationship would change in that there would be a clear link where we have an agreement in terms of the service that you're providing, because you'd be providing it on behalf of the regional district. And so with that, we would just simply articulate what reporting requirements we would have. They can be almost exactly similar to what you're currently doing. But they might change depending on the requirements that other members might prefer to see. The city might want to see some specific details. And so we would iron all that out in advance of identifying what the service would include. And then that would be brought to the electorate for decision. So there's two ways of having that. There's the alternative approval process, where we simply move forward with the development of the service. And if 10% of the population or more say no, then we stop that and move towards a referendum. Or we just jump straight into a referendum. But ultimately, we can only create that service with the assent of the public. And so the board gets to decide how they engage the public that way, and then we as staff sort of prepare that basis. Hopefully that helps answer the question.
The last time we presented to the board, or the second, 2 times ago, I can't remember, we did our little vignette things. I was one of the stars. I can't remember which board member brought up the fact that a lot of the crimes are officially committed in the city core and your regional district. But we strongly reject that premise because the ramifications go all the way out. They go to Banfield, they go out Cherokee, Banfield. And recently, Tamara was telling us of a situation where I believe the crime happened in Nanaimo, but the family was all here, and she was dealing with 10 people, the ramifications of that. So I grew up in large cities and have now lived here for nearly 45 years. And I've discovered both the joys and the heartaches of a small community. Everything is connected. So I just wanted to.
Thank you for that comment. Director Mastangelo, then Director Siga. Please go ahead, Director Mastangelo, then Director Roth.
Thank you. First, I just want to say thank you for all of everyone's hard work that they're doing there. Really appreciative. And I hear that story and recognize that, Port Alberni and other towns is a landing for a lot of people that have family or that are going away, which is a question. Some of my question has been answered in other people's questions, which is, who are your biggest partners? It sounds like you're looking for a partnership and an agreement where there's a lasting relationship to be able to support one another. Have you had partnership agreement work with organizations or communities in the area that have been really successful, or is that part of your work in general? I don't want to be too specific, but I do believe there are organizations out there that would be interested in partnering, and I think that is, so I'm curious if that's part of the work that you're doing right now, or have you had successful relationships in the past? It just sounds like there's so much demand and the growth is really necessary. So that's my first question.
So right now we don't we only have the regional district and the government where we get our funding from. And I'm not sure, is there a reason? Because we're not a charitable organization, I think that prevents us from doing some of those things. We are a society, but we don't give out receipts. So I think that interferes with the question.
But if you're asking about who we are partners with, we're partners with everybody in the Valley, all the other service agencies we coordinate with and do work with. So I'm not quite sure which level of questioning it was. We're in school district making presentations. We work with the Sage Haven. We work with every other social service agency in the Valley in doing the work that Victim Services does.
And also private counselors. So
Thank
yes,
you.
I think that was.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And am I allowed to ask a second question? Or did?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. And my second question is kind of moves into those secondary societies that help victim services. Is there a survey? Is there a way to check in with victims that have originally went through, but then got kind of passed down? And is there a way to check in with people, or is that part of the service, 3 months down, 6 months down? Because sometimes things get lost in those secondary organizations where people would think that wouldn't happen, but it does happen. I've seen it happen.
Okay, so first of all, we deal with any anything that comes into the RCM police station. So if I was a victim of assault, but I didn't report it to the police, but I went to the women's center, for example, so that isn't part of our mandate. So when we refer to say, are you thinking to a counselor? Like with
No, sorry, I was just actually referring to people that went through the RCMP, have reported it, have been in contact with you, and then we're just kind of, yeah, it sounds like there's yeah, it all, yeah.
I'll just so if they're part of the court, if charges are going late and go to court, we stay with them through the whole process. I don't know if you have a specific example that I could maybe, like I've had, one of the unfortunate things that happened is that I did have a client who, it was near my retirement, but it was started about a year before, and clients get about 26 sessions of counseling. So with a year and a half to my retirement, I thought I would have enough time to see her till the end. But she was sporadic with that. And so when I told her that I was going to be leaving sooner, then she stopped coming to counseling. So I did let Tamara know. And I don't know what happened to her, but I mean, that was the only time I can think that I would have thought Tamara would have continued with her.
Yeah. She spends a lot of her time on the phone, and follows through. Like she'll tell stories, and they can last up to 2 years, the connection with the victim. And the going into court is a big part of it. And I think you all know that we now have is it called a therapy dog? Or Milo. And he's really proving his worth, especially with children and the calmness. And he goes into court with her. And especially when they're giving their first statement to the police nearly always call him and her in, or even just him, because he knows his job. But where's the person that asked the question up there? I do believe that she is very consistent in following through, and she can give you, I'm sure she can give you statistics on that, just not names in terms of protecting.
Thank you, Director Siga, then Director Roth. Please go ahead, Director Siga.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we're once again as a regional district board put in the position of having mandates from the provincial government that don't really fit into our grant and aid programming. So I would like to see it clarified. Like, I'm assuming that everybody within the valley that is receiving the service, all of the government bodies that are having populations receiving the services, would need to contribute. And it's a good service, and I think it's perfectly logical that happen. But I think we do need better clarification, because in my mind, this is not a grant and aid type thing. This is more of a service thing. And if it's mandated by the provincial government, then we have to make sure that, like, just in terms of percentages, it seems like the percentage that we currently contribute would be population-wise about appropriate, but I'm not clear because I don't have the numbers. So if I can get a comment, perhaps through the chair from Daniel, on whether we could approach the provincial government for clarification, and find out what other communities do for their contribution to this service. Thanks.
Let's go ahead, Daniel.
We have as well. I'll just iterate that we have, and we can bring that information back to the board when we're considering this. But there are numerous examples out there that we do have, and I believe it was from last year's report where we were flagging what other communities around us, Mid-Island particularly, were doing in terms of matching those funds. I think it is an accurate statement to say that most are doing a 50-50. Some go higher, some are a little bit lower. But if you were to take the 50-50 matching as the example, then our 26,000 is well below the average. And this would be, you are correct. In my view, this would be a lot easier as a service. Because as things change over time, it wouldn't be a grant and aid decision. It would be a taxation decision based on how things grow, and there would be a bit of a predictable formula. So if we were aiming for 50% as the RCMP office or offices grow, we would know whether or not our amount is also going up to match. Which would just make it easier for us in predicting the budgets. The challenge with grant and aid is that you're always going to have competing interests. And it can be challenging to compare, victim services with search and rescue with a school backpack program, right? Like we start looking at these and go like, well, which is better, which is more important? So the more we can build, in my view, my advice would be the more we can build regular predictable things into a service with agreed upon formulas, the easier it becomes for those agencies to do their long-term planning and preparation. And the easier it is for us to focus on what grant and aid ought to be, which is more of those 1 to 2 year one-offs that we're trying to, sort of plant the seed to see if hopefully something can grow into a better community service or a completely independent thing. And so it is an ongoing discussion, but as a staff level, we would prefer to see something like this as a service.
Daniel, can you maybe just explain next steps on how we can create a service for this organization?
Well, frankly, what we would do is reach out to another regional district and just get their bylaw as a starting place. There's no point in redefining the wheel on this one. The research and development is rip off and duplicate. We would take their bylaw, we would bring that as a draft bylaw back to the board to see if you like the bones of it. And if you do, then we'd sit down with victim services and talk about how that works. But as other people or other regional districts are doing this, I would expect that we wouldn't need a lot of change because people have already figured it out. And so we would just need to bring that forward. I think the big debate that we would have, and I don't think this would be a surprise to the board, is going to be apportionment. What is that formula? Who's paying what? And why? So that would be one of our larger discussions, and the method of endorsement of community assent. This board has had a preference to referendums, which are more timely or take more time and are higher cost. And so we just need to make sure that the board is happy with whatever approach, whether that be an alternative approval or whether that be a referendum, but that impacts the amount of work because it is more labor intensive for ACRD staff to implement a referendum.
Did you have any questions on that, Mary?
No, I didn't. I guess because that's something that our board is questioning is, are we even in the right funding pot in terms of the grant and aid? And Penny brought that up as well. So.
The short answer is yes, because there is no other pot right now that exists for you. And so the creation of a service would be us creating the right pot, because a service is the right pot. But because there is no service, the only connection that we have that ties back to the regional board is the grant and aid process, which is a bit of a I don't know, it's like having a hammer to do the dishes. It's not the best tool, but it is the only tool.
However, just for this year, they would have to apply for grant and aid, correct?
For this year, you'd need grant and aid. I don't think we'd be able to put together I know we would not be able to put together a service that fast. So it would be grant and aid. And what might be useful is talking about percentages and what people think is an equitable model, because we would use that apportionment formula that we use for grant and aid to sort of try and mirror the creation of how we would finance a service. So the effort would not be lost. But it would be nice if this were the last year of Grantham Aid.
You asked a question when you said that we would talk about percentages. So you're talking that we would be talking about percentages of.
We would include you in the discussion because there would likely be a bit of a historic view on where calls are going and where services are going. Like you said, crime could occur in Nanaimo and still have a huge impact in the region. So it's not about just being the city or the municipalities. But I think the board benefits from understanding over time where we see the services go, because that helps them understand and justify to their public why it is that they would be 10% versus 25% of the costs. And so that's what I mean by percentages. So you would help feed that, but it would not be your decision. It would be ultimately, does Sprout Lake pay 10% or 25%? Does the city pay, 50% versus something else? And so that's the discussion that we want to explore. And then we try and create a consistent formula, right? So we don't have to change the bylaw, because that is also labor intensive. What we try and do is get a formula that will survive the test of time and maybe revisit it in a decade, so to speak.
Director Roth, Director Cote, then Director Jack. Please go ahead, Director Roth.
Thank you. I know that there's another organization in town that provides victim services that is also funded by the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General. And I believe they receive more, or, about what you receive or more. So I'm a little bit afraid of a service because I don't know where it would end here, or would we be expected to fund other organizations as well? There's also other First Nations organizations that may also be funded through the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General for victim services. Personally, I think what you're asking for is ongoing core funding, which is reasonable.
Exactly.
Grant and aid isn't suitable for that. In fact, it can hurt us. It downgrades what we do in one of these studies that was done recently. I like the idea of a service area rather than a grant and aid myself, but it's not just about you, unfortunately,
right? Because
the other organizations would be looking at, oh, well, they're funding, the ACRD is now funding police victim services. What about us? We have victim services too, and we'd like more money. So I would just be cautious of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
One of the, I think I know what other society you're talking about. And is it the Women's Center?
Yeah, it's Sage Haven, and they do have victim services, community-based victim services, and yours is the police-based victim services, but it's all the same pot in the provincial government.
Oh, that's right. And when we get somebody who with sexual assault, we do the police part of it. We do the intake, and then that gets referred over to Sage Haven, and we don't continue with that client anymore.
I do think, though, that I like the idea of a service area. I just want to be cautious with it.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cote.
Thank you. I'm happy that we're talking about this creation of a service, and understanding that there's no way that we could design that for this budget. But I'm looking at the future budgets and creating a service. I think that this board likes to go to referendum. So I'm asking staff, is there any possibility that we could tie in a referendum with this upcoming election? Because that would be the most cost-effective way to bring it forward. But I know that it's a lot of work. And I'd actually like a report to the board to include more information, what Director Roth has brought up. There's other services out there. How does it all work together? I'd like more information on that if possible. And that was my question. Thank you.
So and Terry, you might not like this answer, or Cynthia, anything is possible. So, let's start with that. The question is how we how we equip ourselves to successfully do it. What you don't want to do is do a referendum where you don't get all the right information out. You're not able to answer the public questions quick enough. And so what we would need to do in short order between now and an approval of the budget, or even before, we need to identify what additional resources we would need to do a good job of it, make sure the board is fully aware of what resources we're talking about, whether they're internal or external, or how we're reassigning things, and then move forward. One of the key components is information sharing, and that is, we can do all the planning in the world to be ready, but we only test that once the information lands and people start commenting back, saying, well, I have this question that hasn't been answered. And so what we need to do is get information out early enough so people can digest, comment back. But with a referendum, I believe the timelines is 120 days. You have to have all information set and ready where that exchange stops 120 days before the question. And so when you start doing that timeline of, let's say, tying it with the election cycle in October, you back up 120 days, and then you say the budget is approved at the end of March. We have a very narrow window where we're doing an intense amount of communication. And the criticism that we could face is that the public goes, hey, it's way too much information on way too many things all happening at once. And that is a discussion that we would need to have in short order as we line up a number of different potential services. This said, I will still endorse it. I think it would be the right approach for the board to start going down the path of service creation. And what we could do is also just look at a number of different things that would be asked in 2026 and then subsequently in 2027. There are the next delegation is aquatics. We know that's another hot button. But these referendums often don't pass at the first kick. And it's not because the public doesn't like the service. It can sometimes be because of other things that weren't seen, calculated, sometimes just because people felt there was too much information all at once. And so it isn't a bad practice to say, look, referendum round 1 will be 2026. We'll learn from that. And then potential referendum 2 will be 2027. But here are the other questions for other services that we'll ask then. It is more cost effective if we can do these things in-house as opposed to contracting out. And so it's just that time and money balance.
Thank you, Director Jack. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I think the only piece of advice that I would give is that I think it does make sense that we contemplate not only some sort of policy shift for kind of accountability and transparency for our grant and aid processes, but I do think that there are some grants and aid that we give every year that warrant their own service, and that it warrants their own conversations. That being said, I think there needs to be public pressure on all of our directors, to be open to having that conversation about moving things to a service, because that would help in addressing all of those things. And so the grant and aid is not the best way to do it, but it does have the function insofar as it limits the ability of things that should be services to be services, because we're already giving them money and it's the cheap way of doing it. When it comes to something like victim services, this is of regional importance, and this is something that I would argue that everyone should contribute to in some way, shape, or form, because crime affects everybody, and it's something that everyone should take an interest in making sure that it's well supported. That being said, I'm not about to lay a notice of motion or anything like that, but we do need to start somewhere in having a conversation leading up to the local government elections to talk about these sorts of things. But sometimes it's not at the front of mind, so we need to be able to have those conversations in a good way. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Becca.
Thank you. Great discussions. I value and appreciate the victim services and what they provide our communities. I think one of the elephants in the room, from my perspective, is the lack of provincial funding and the expectation that a municipal government or a regional government will pick up the shortfalls, and that, you know, therein is the challenge where we don't have enough funds to provide all of the requests that come in. So while I'm in favor of considering moving this into a service, I think that, as Chair Jack has, you know, alluded to, is that we need to pressure the provincial government into providing adequate funds and making it clear that they making it clear that they're downloading these important services onto the municipalities without adequate provincial funding. Thank you.
I think that'd be a great UBCM conversation. Director Cote?
That's exactly what I'm saying, Chair, is this has gone from this regional district many times to UBCM as a resolution, as well as many other communities have brought that forward to UBCM, asking the province to fund this service and others adequately in the past, and they've never stepped up.
Thanks. So I think we're kind of winding down our comments and conversations. So can I get some recommendations from staff for next steps? Can you have it like as a board agenda item, or how do you want to proceed? What's the best way?
As it's a delegation, we didn't prepare any recommendations, but what we could do is on the February 11th, we could create just a bit of an overview of options that we, you know, frame. And I think some of this was in other reports, so it's just a matter of taking it out of last year's reports. We could identify again those key things that could qualify as a service, just so that the board is aware of what's on the map. I brought up search and rescue, but there's a number of different agencies that provide service that are well outside of what would be a grant and aid, and so I would recommend that we simply request that staff come back at the subsequent board meeting to provide some of those options.
Do you need a motion for that?
Always good to have a motion, yes.
Would anyone like to make that motion? Director Cote, second by Director Roth. Yeah, please go ahead.
So could we make it more broad, the service area, rather than just having victim services? Perhaps we could have emergency services, or maybe there's a better way of saying it, but that might be an idea.
I think it's a really good idea, and yeah, I think that's part of the intent of making sure that we identify the number of different things that could be a service, and then we have the discussion, right? If it can be one service together, that's fantastic. If it doesn't quite connect in a good way, then we can answer the question to the public. Have you considered yes, and why did you or did you not? We can answer that.
So for this year, you have to still just do the grant and aid application, and we'll start working on the service maybe for the following year and see how that works for you. But we really appreciate you come in. Please go ahead.
Is there anything that we can be doing now to move this along, or to not so much move it along, but give you the information you need to be able to make some of the decisions that you need to make?
I think the core information that you provide as part of the grant application, which goes through, I think Heather Zenner collects that. We'll start there, and what we'll do is that if we see that anything that we benefit from having additional information, we'll reach out through that channel and just try and get those details. My only immediate thought was just those statistics on where things are without naming names, but just sort of identifying, when you talk about the ripples, you know, what direction do those ripples typically go in? Because if there are themes, that is useful, but it might not be useful yet. So just, I'd say hold tight, and we'll start by doing this first report and then reach out from there.
Director Roth?
Just one final question. Are you funded separately for the West Coast for
Yes.
victim services? So there's more, because we also cover
That's
the West
right.
Coast.
Their contract covers their costs. The difference is that she gets 53,000 and we get 86,000. Her average over the last 2 years has been 8 fines a month, and I think ours has been 52. And so she's like, what is that? 7 times, we have 7 times more people to serve, but she get 53 to 86. I mean, that's even less than half again. So yes, this is the Port Alberni policing area because victim services, we cover our costs.
Okay, so it's more than just the Alberni Valley, though. It's the West Coast and Alberni.
Right. It's Wyatt and Kildonan and
Okay, and all the First Nations.
and all the First Nations that are
Okay, I just wanted to get it in my mind.
right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any final questions or comments, Director Siga?
Thank you. Yeah, what comes to mind then is if the funding is not adequate, and you had a question about what you could possibly do, I would say that a letter regarding your funding level might be in order, and just pointing out that local governments are being downloaded with these costs. Just a suggestion, but that might be something that might be worthwhile.
Thank you. Any final questions? Any final comments from the board? I want to thank you very much for coming in, and I appreciate that comment that you made that it's not just people in downtown that are causing the crime. People might live here, but they're affected by crime if they're in Nanaimo. And I just want to say 8 years ago, I was at a knife point in downtown Nanaimo, and it still bothers me to this day. So people are affected in different ways and different places. So thank you for that. And we really appreciate you coming in. I think that we're making some good steps forward to help.
Absolutely. Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much. Kind of got what we hoped for.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't envy you your job at all. And we genuinely did want to come in and hear your side of things. So thank you for your openness.
Okay, so now the second delegation is, oh. Cynthia just reminded me you didn't vote on the motion yet. Can you read that out? It's been a few minutes.
Okay, so what I have is that the Committee of the Whole recommend that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors direct staff to investigate the creation of a potential service for victim services in the region and bring a report to the February 11th, 2026 Board of Directors meeting.
Yeah, please go ahead, Director Roth.
I would like to adjust it to not just be specific to victim services, but to be, how would you say that? How would you frame that? Like emergency services or responsive services? I don't know.
Maybe vulnerable people's services?
Sure, let's try that.
Yeah, okay, that would be good.
Are you okay with that, Director Sparrow? Because you had mentioned, had your hand up as well.
That's correct. Yeah, because we want to broaden it to, you know, all services that are related to acts.
Do we have?
Not if the mover and seconder are both okay with that. So Director Cote and Director Ross.
Are you okay with that change, Director Cote? Yeah. Okay, okay. So everybody understands the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Cynthia. So next delegation is HCMA Architecture and Design presentation of findings for Echo Aquatics renovation feasibility study. It is Mike von, and I'm not going to say this correctly, Teisenhausen, architect, and Carl Janrup, principal from HCMA. And who's going to start today?
Hello, I can start. My name is Mike von Tiesenhausen. You did better than most people in the pronunciation. Thank you. And I have, instead of CJ Rupp, who is our principal in Victoria, I have Darren Harding here, who was heavily involved in the feasibility study for the replacement facility that was done a couple of years ago or last year. So yeah, my name is Mike von Tiesenhausen. I'm an intern architect with HCMA and Darren is an architect and principal at HCMA. I don't know if you wanted to say hi, Darren.
Yeah, hello everyone. Great to be here with you and good to see a lot of familiar faces. So glad to be here for this.
Nice to see you, Darren.
So we've prepared a slideshow. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, so this goes through the project that we've been working on the last number of months, which is a facility assessment and feasibility study for the Echo Pool. I'll go through the project in 4 steps. We'll outline the objective of the project. We'll go through the facility assessment, the procedure, and our findings. And then we'll go through the feasibility study, which was conducted in 2 scopes of work, a life extension scope and a modernization scope, which we explored. And then we'll summarize the findings, going through a timeline, outlining the risks and costing analysis. So the objective of the project was to evaluate the condition and integrity of the existing structure and identify options for renovation. We did this in 2 phases. The facility assessment, so to get a comprehensive understanding, and the feasibility study, where we studied these 2 scopes. So the life extension scope was we looked at what was required to maintain the facility, and in the modernization scope, we looked at what was possible to achieve by a more comprehensive renovation of the facility within the existing footprint of the building. The facility assessment was conducted in 4 areas around code compliance, structural systems, mechanical systems, and an architectural assessment. We had a team of consultants, so Celerity Engineering conducted the code compliance and produced an assessment report for that. Herald Engineering conducted the structural assessment and produced the report, and AME Consulting Group looked at the mechanical systems, and HCMA provided the architectural assessment. The main goal of this assessment, like I've said, was to identify the major deficiencies and identify any end-of-life components and basically just identify if there's anything that would impede future renovation. So the code compliance piece identified a number of items, primarily around accessibility, washroom accessibility, shower accessibility. With a older building like this, a lot of items don't meet current code standards. So we sort of went through and listed those items. It's really important to note that the code specifically states that there's no regulatory requirement to retroactively bring the building up to code. However, any new work is required to comply with current code. So the most significant area of non-compliance is accessibility. And additionally, the building also requires to be sprinklered. Often what we do with pool buildings is we don't have sprinklers in the natatorium area, but we need to get a alternative solution to prove that. But the rest of the building really should be sprinklered. It's also important to note that in terms of applying the code, the aquatic facility, the community center, the museum, and the library are considered a single building with different occupancy classes. That's an important kind of thing to remember, as we'll discuss later with structural. So the structural consultants visited the site a couple of times, once with the pool water and once with the pools drained, so that they could evaluate visually the pool basins. Their assessment was limited to visual assessment, so there was no destructive testing or anything. So the findings were that the pool is in generally fair condition. There's no major cracks in the basin or anything like that. And similar with the building, there's no major deterioration. The building is not, you know, appears level and structurally sound. The primary concern, however, with the pool structure is the gutters. The gutters show significant deterioration. They're a recessed gutter. They're a recessed overflow gutter, and on the inside of that gutter, there's exposed rebar, and there needs to be a significant renovation done to them in order to repair that. And then in terms of the building structure, the main concern is the seismic vulnerability. So the building does not would not meet seismic requirements, current seismic requirements. And so as we propose renovations, there could be additional work required, and it could be quite significant, as we'll discuss further in the feasibility study. Mechanical systems, generally in fair condition, everything is operating. However, everything, because of the age of the facility and the cycle of maintenance, almost everything is nearing or at the end of its life, with exception of the boiler plant. It's obvious that everything is has been very well maintained, and it was noted that the sort of maintenance costs are creeping up as the building ages. There's a number of items you'll see in the report, such as the chlorine room ventilation, the natatorium air handler, and the soda ash agitator, which are seen here, that are at the end of their life, still functioning, but there are concerns about how they'll operate in the future. The architectural assessment was limited to 3 components: site, building envelope, and building program. Again, the site assessment really found, we looked at accessibility opportunities or deficiencies or those types of things, and really found that there's just minor things like sidewalk grading and stuff like that need to be fixed in order to meet code. And we also looked at just sort of a high level. We made some comments about if this was to be a development project, would the bylaws meet, or would we meet bylaws for parking and setbacks and stuff like that if we were to do an expansion? The building envelope focused primarily on the roof, which is, again, been well maintained, but at the end of its life. This was a comment also in the structural assessment about, the roof should be replaced in order to protect the structure, which is functioning. The walls, doors, and windows are all functioning. There are just, some doors are deteriorating. There's no major problem. From a building program perspective, this was sort of our main concern from the architectural standpoint. The building, because it's been incrementally upgraded, there are numerous sort of fragmented pieces and not ideal situations where, for example, you have to walk through the pool area to get to the fitness area, and the tot pool and the hot pool are sort of off to the side, and the family change room is not connected to the change room. So there's the key observation was that there's this sort of fragmented nature of the program, and there are a number of issues, I guess, with that, with just in terms of a user experience perspective. So to summarize, there's a clear sense of pride. One of the key sort of takeaways is the fact, what I just went through, the small improvements made over the years leads to a lack of cohesion of the facility. Most of the HVAC and pool systems are near the end of their life. Accessibility is primary issue in terms of code compliance, and seismic upgrading is a significant risk to any renovation. So this leads us to phase 2, where we develop these 2 scopes. so the life extension scope and the modernization scope, and we produced Class D estimates for each scope to give us a conceptual idea of how much each scenario would cost. So the life extension focuses on a sort of like for like approach. We're not providing a huge improvement. We're just sort of extending the life of the buildings, and we aimed to do so for 20 years. So all of the recommendations from the facility assessment reports, we just sort of did baseline minimum upgrades. And we also assumed no major seismic upgrading, so which requires that the community center not be used as an emergency shelter in the event of an earthquake. So just for the purposes of, not expanding the project to include the whole complex, we made that assumption that the community center will have to be changed to not be included in any emergency plans as a refuge. I've gone through all of these. I think the feasibility study, the scope of work was developed to include the fire suppression system, addition of accessible and universal washrooms, addition of accessible passive travel from the parking lot, approximately 90% replacement of pool and building systems, 100% replacement of roofing membranes with no sort of thermal upgrading, and minor seismic upgrades, which includes just restraint of air handling units and lighting and that sort of thing. From an architectural standpoint, we sort of revived the envelope roofing, replaced the pool gutters, and then there's two components that we thought were kind of more critical to renovate the sauna area to be more cohesive, and renovate the office, the admin space, to include a washroom and a kitchenette. The modernization scope was all of the things in the life extension, but with more of sort of comprehensive thinking around updating, making things more efficient. We still were limited to the building footprint. We didn't want to propose an expansion. And we, in terms of seismic upgrading, we still are assuming that the community center will be of normal importance, which means that it cannot be used as a place of refuge. So from a code standpoint, very similar thing, incorporated into more comprehensive renovations of the change rooms and lobby and admin areas. From a mechanical standpoint, 90% replacement of the building systems. We just proposed more efficient systems be replaced. Structural is more of a significant reinforcement of the building structure and seismic separation from the community center. So that means building a separate wall, but to separate the facility from the community center. And that's really just to limit the scope of reinforcing the existing facility. And from an architectural standpoint, same thing. More extensive change room renovation, more extensive lobby and admin renovation. So we're sort of, and more extensive, fit and finishes of everything throughout, just to sort of provide a more cohesive feeling for users using the facility. So that's generally those two scopes. This is the timeline. We've completed the assessment and feasibility study, where the remainder of the year would be your decision, engagement, and decision-making process, approval process. And then next year in the spring, we would be able to more extensively design whichever scope we proceed with, tender it through the summer, and aiming for a construction start in the fall. We anticipate at high level estimate of construction duration would be approximately 15 months, which during which the existing facility would need to be closed and not available to the public. So yeah, the summary, maybe the most important part here is the life extension estimate is comes close to $10 million, 9.6 million, which is only construction cost, does not include any escalation or project contingencies. I believe everything else we've gone over. The modernization is 12.06 million. Same thing, that's just the construction cost. So we've also provided in the report this table, which takes the estimated construction cost, capital cost, and applies escalation through 2026 and 2027, as well as a construction contingency of 25, project and construction contingency of 25%, which is the same as the pool replacement project. We did it this way so that these could be sort of escalated in the same way. Which leads us to the life extension scenario being about 13.3 and modernization scenario being about 16.5 million. So in conclusion, the assessment shows that the building is well maintained, but showing aging infrastructure and primarily has some functional limitations. The feasibility study shows that we're not really able to correct those functional limitations, and that most of the renovation is largely sort of corrective and bringing the existing building and dealing with sort of an old facility that doesn't comply to current codes. So preservation may be feasible, but replacement or expansion would be required to sort of address those functional limitations and add capacity or meet long-term community needs going forward. So yeah, that's what we have found from that study.
Thank you. Dr. Cote.
Thank you. Through the chair, I have a couple of questions from your presentation. I'm concerned why not going forward being able to use as an emergency place, and why not expansion? So those were two of my concerns why they weren't looked at. Thank you.
Do you have a response for that?
Yeah, I believe that the reason why we didn't expand was to limit the project to what was possible within the existing footprint. I think that an expansion project could be looked at, although for comparison's sake was not like we could design an expansion to be sort of whatever we want it to be and to provide really the needs of a new facility. I think yeah, we were trying to keep it comparable to sort of just a life extension that was sort of set out as the goal at the beginning.
Thank you. From looking at this, it doesn't really look like it's being recommended to do either of these. There's a lot of things that are, like I don't know where the city would be sending people in an emergency if they couldn't send them to ECHO. So this creating more problems than it is solving. So I just concerned that we didn't look at an expansion to make things more acceptable going forward in the future. 20 years is not very long. I don't know that we'll even have it paid off by the end of that term. So yeah, those are my concerns. Thanks.
Daniel?
I just think it's important to flag that the request of the board was to look at a renovation. And so the comparison here, and it's not making a recommendation because it was simply to bring this information back to the board. The comparison that we will make later on is new build versus renovation. And we all assumed that the renovation would be the lowest possible cost. And I think this is what it's demonstrating. I think when we start blurring the lines around the expansion and whatnot, that's a different discussion. But for the sake of what the board asked for, this is what the board asked for. So just to make sure that we're clear, like on why, the why is because this is explicitly what the board requested.
Can I ask you to please stop sharing just so I could see the people on the screen better and I don't miss anyone? Thank you so much. Director Sparrow, please go ahead.
Sorry, can I add?
Go ahead.
Can I?
Yes,
Can I
please go
just
ahead.
add one quick comment here? Just regarding the emergency response and the ability of the building, I think one key thing to note here is that we're flagging that from a seismic standpoint, the structure does not meet seismic code at the moment, and so in the event of a seismic emergency, it would not be deemed, you know, a safe building to go to. That doesn't mean that all emergencies, like every community will make do with the facilities that they have, and in the event of an emergency such as, you know, a fire or people are being displaced from homes or things like that, it can still be a reception center where people can gather. You can support people in the community. But I think what we're flagging here is that based on our structural assessment, it doesn't meet seismic code currently, and therefore it doesn't meet a post-disaster classified building, which has a bit of a different connotation. So I hope that helps clarify that a little bit.
Thank you. Director Sparrow, please go ahead.
Thank you. That'll be part of my comment too. Now, the city knows they have a problem with that in the part of emergencies for earthquakes, but fire all, you're fine. But yes, that would be a city problem because we didn't ask. We asked for the pool only. And I think part of the upgrade here, phase 2, but the second one was to upgrade the pool to a seismic structure. The one question I do have here is, it says here, the main pool, it does not meet FINA guidelines. So what would it cost to meet the guidelines? That's one of the problems. They can't hold events in their pool because of some of the pool structure doesn't meet the guidelines. Can you tell me what that is and what it costs to fix that problem?
That is more around the dimensions of the existing pool basins. So there's the FINA guidelines state a certain length and width of lane and a certain length of pool to be able to have a competition or something like that. It's more of a, I don't know that it's really would be of huge concern. I don't know if there's competitions being held there right now that would need to meet those guidelines. But it was just something to note that if that was desired, that would be a limitation of the existing pool. So we didn't look at expanding the pool, but what it would entail is changing the dimensions of the pool, either to have fewer lanes in the same basin or changing the bulkhead location or something like that.
So it wouldn't be a major fix. So we can move the bulkhead, which hasn't been moved in pretty well my lifetime, because it could, and something broken, it didn't get moved. But if we could move the bulkhead or during the renovations, change the basin length at one end, we can meet the guidelines for having an event. Because that's one of the problems they have here. They can't stage events because something's wrong with the pool. It's like our ice arena was built too short for God knows how long because they ran out of money and they shortened up one end. So we can fix that problem. We can probably bring in events, which would make it better and more appealing for us as the valley, but I don't know what the cost is. So,
yeah, it kind of depends, I think, on what kind of event you want to have and what you're trying to achieve. I think because of the extensive repair to the gutter, right now the bulkhead is like tied into the gutter and runs along the track of the gutter, and so if we and also part of both renovation scenarios was to replace the bulkhead because it's showing signs of deterioration. So all of those through the gutter replacement and bulkhead replacement, all of those considerations would be taken into account. If it needs to be, we could even, if we're rebuilding the gutters, we could even make the pool slightly deeper if that was so desired.
Sure, I don't know what we need to make it regulations, but it'd be nice to see if that could be done, what the rough cost would be, so we have an idea, because that would make it more feasible and use as a facility. Because right now they can't hold events, so that's loss of income, I guess, to use it. But Other than that, great. It looks like, so there's two scenarios. There's the 9 million and the 12 million. The 12 million is essentially upgraded to meet the standards of post-disaster. Is that correct?
No, it wouldn't meet the standards of post-disaster. The building in both scenarios, we're still assuming that the building is what's called normal building importance, which still has a seismic requirement, but it's not a post-disaster building, which has, off the top of my head, 30 or 40% more seismic force resistance requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Neely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. So first of all, yeah, the emergency couldn't be used for a major earthquake event, and I appreciate the comments. And I would hope that the city would utilize the arena and the athletic hall and much more modern in the event. But yes, it is right. We can still use it in time of a tsunami, per se, or something like that. It can still be used. And then the size of the pool, that's always been an issue again. Thank you, Director Sparrow, for mentioning the arena. It seems like back in the day we just want to build and get it done, and it's like afterwards, like it's maybe not too long, so, or maybe just too short. So I'd like to see that. I'd like to see what it would take. I mean, physically looking at it, and I go to the pool once a week myself, so I'm a frequent user of the pool. Without taking out one of the walls, I don't know how that would be accommodated to get it to a spot. But I would love to see it, because Tsunami Swim Club back in the day would hold events, but small events, and I've been there to help, but they're not to the point. And like you said, the bulkhead, Director Sparrow, that thing hasn't moved since I was a kid too. That's just, it's ready to be taken out or fixed or whatever needs to happen there, but it's not going to be easy. So, and I will just maybe just a little bit of historical. So just for our guests, I was city councilor between 2000 and 2008 here for the city of Port Alberni. So these conversations have been happening a long time, and I appreciate the work that you've put into it. The previous expansion from the city of Port Alberni idea was to expand to the back into the wooded area where Penny Lane is, but that was prior to the high school being built, where half of Penny Lane was taken for the high school. So even if the expansion did take place today as it was envisioned 20 years ago, it would take up the majority of the rest of the wooded area behind. And I'm not sure that there's a political not sure that the people would really enjoy the rest of that, as that was a contentious issue during the construction of the school itself. So, but it's been talked about a lot, and I really appreciate coming forward with all this information. The one question I do have, it says approximately 15 months of construction time. And I'm just wondering if, maybe I just didn't hear it right, is that the pool will have to be shut down, or the entire building will have to be shut down for that time?
Just the pool. So with the modernization scenario where we are building the seismic separation, that will affect, we've assumed for that scenario that sort of the bulk of that work takes place on the community center side. So the community center would be affected by that piece of work, although, likely could be limited. I don't think the community center would need to be shut down for the full 15 months. The bulk of the construction timeline is driven by the mechanical and the pool systems upgrades.
Just to follow up, thank you, Madam Chair, appreciate that. Yeah, no, just because obviously we have existing users in there. Everybody uses the library, uses the museum. We've just come to an agreement with the local Sunshine Club, 55 and over, for utilization of their rooms in there. And so, of course, we understand during construction there is going to be some displacement, but of course the existing users would want to be part of that process and at least be notified. So thank you very much for your comments and answering that question. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Is the shutdown of 15 months the same for both options, or is that different for the options? And I got a different question after that.
Yeah, it's a high level estimate. We've kept it the same for both options. The bulk of the work, I think, that would take up that time, like I mentioned previously, was the pools systems and the mechanical systems, that sort of reconfiguration for both scenarios is, you know, different equipment, but generally the same. And that is, I think, what will sort of dictate that construction timeline.
Okay, second question is, so we had a report from you guys last 2024 that had the operating costs at about $1 million, and now we're at 2.4. How come that's is more than doubled in the past year and a half?
That I thought that 2.4 in this report was taken directly from that 2024 feasibility study.
Yeah, I just had it on my screen here a second ago, but yeah, it was about $1 million and a projected revenue of $200,000.
Oh, yeah, I
So
had
that was the latest 2024 HCME report of the existing facility.
Okay.
Daniel would like to comment on that, please.
Just to add a comment to that, part of the operational costs that were identified when we were talking about a new build was also visibility. So everything was designed in terms of how many staff you need to ensure that when you're supervising the different spaces, you can actually see the different corners. The existing building, my understanding is that it requires more labor as a result of having way more structured corners and not an open concept design. And so the verification for the lifeguards and whatnot, that increases. And then my other understanding is with the existing mechanical and whatnot and the labor requirements around that. But that would be some of the differences that I would have identified.
So just to follow up on that, so when we had our tour there a year ago, we talked about that, but this is the operating cost now and then projected in the future for the exact same facility that's currently operating, and the rules haven't changed. So I don't know why the operating costs would double, because you have the exact same things happening, the same number of people, the corners haven't changed, carrying on. They already said they're not allowed to use cameras and AI to see if someone's fallen down and hasn't said stop moving. So you still have to have all the same traffic patterns for the lifeguards and everyone else working there. But just to carry on, next question I have. In 1990, the city of Port Alberni did a seismic survey of city-owned buildings. And for the actual pool itself, it says several additions were constructed without consideration of seismic action and total structure. One can expect that even with upgrading, some damage would occur unless total upgrading is contemplated. Has the city ever done any upgrades to this facility in the past 34 years after that 1990 report has been done? Or are we looking to have the regional district help with seismic activities for the city-owned building in the future? Thank you.
I'm not aware. We didn't look at if the city had done any, like we couldn't find any, or we were not provided any plans or records of them having upgraded the facility at all. And it appears that a lot of what we could see in the existing facility it matches sort of the original drawings of the building. So there's nothing obvious that has been done.
Okay, I know the city has dropped their maintenance of this facility by half in the past year, depending on what we're going to move forward, but just wondering if any upgrades have been done, and I don't think so either. Thank you.
Councillor Mealy? Sorry, Director Mealy?
Sorry, I thought I was out of turn there. The family change rooms were added in 2000. I think it's 2000. So that is an addition since 1990 that I'm aware of. That was not part of the original building, obviously.
Yeah, but the entire shell was required to have a seismic upgrade, but nothing has been done. Thank you.
Yeah, I was referring mostly specifically to seismic upgrades. There has been work to the building, but yeah.
Thank you, Director Roth.
Thank you. Could you also please explain the Class D estimate definition again? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. So Class D is a conceptual estimate based on schematic design level of detail. And it's just a classification system that we use that goes through Class D, C, B, and then A, and it's just different levels of detailed design.
So it could be viewed as somewhat maybe inaccurate or, to be built upon. Yeah.
Certainly. Yeah. I think I'm just going off the top of my head, but I believe that in the report that we have from the quantity surveyor, it suggests that Class D estimates are accurate to 30%, something like 7 out of 10 times or something like that. There's a statement like that in that report that sort of speaks to that.
Thank you.
Director Sparrow?
Thank you. I got one more question now. Because you put the cost of $2 million on both estimates, but the modernization is going to restructure some of the inside structures, make it open concept. Wouldn't that change the amount of people on the floor at all times, or does that matter? Because if we're going to spend another $3 million modernizing, hopefully we make it back in labor costs by being more efficient. But it looks to me like there isn't. So can someone explain the benefits of the modernization one, please?
Yeah, so we didn't look at the operational benefits at that level of detail. Those numbers really just were put in there. The operational costs were put in there to fairly compare to the replacement project.
Okay, if nobody else wants to speak, I would like to make a few comments, if I may. I have an email from the manager of facilities and the CEO who reviewed the report, and please don't ask me any questions. I'm just going to read the email. Information gaps in the report, building envelope requires correction. Number 2, approximately $238,000 is required in asset renewal projects, must be factored into the report. These are safety upgrades required. And the report should more strongly advocate for transitioning from gaseous chlorine to sodium hypochlorite. So, and then I have a couple of comments, if I may. I'm going to be honest. I had a difficulty finding the time to read through the entire report, so a lot of it was scanning. So if I missed something, please forgive me. I noticed that pipes in the ground and what's behind the walls, you don't know till you get in there. So I think there's going to be an additional cost. I think it's safe to assume this is a 60-year-old building. The pipes in the ground and whatever is behind the walls is going to have to be replaced. And I think coring was not completed because that was probably out of your scope, but we need to do the coring to look at the actual stability of the building. Staffing costs were not included in this. There's going to be costs for staffing and rehiring and retraining. So that's going to be a significant cost that we have to look at as well, because it is going to be closed for 15 months. I didn't see any upgrades to offices completed in there. If you're going to renovate the building, why are we not looking at the offices as well? And I did read that replacement of the tiles is not going to be looked at this time. If you're going to spend millions of dollars, we need to look at upgrading the whole entire building. It's just that if you're upgrading a house, you want to do everything. That's my comments. I don't know if you have any responses to these.
Yeah, just to go, yeah, we didn't look at the nuances of operational costs, staffing. There are, in terms of office upgrades, the modernization scenario, what was included in the Class D cost estimate included office upgrades, a significant office upgrade actually with and rebuilding the reception and providing more continuity between the offices and the lifeguard station, for example, and the accessible and providing accessible washrooms to the public there. That was all sort of, I maybe just sort of skimmed over it, but yeah, that was in the lobby and admin area. That would be complete renovation of those spaces. And in the life extension scenario, we've reduced the scope of the interior finish like things like tile, just because that can be quite costly. We're trying to find sort of a baseline approach to that. And so it's, I think it's noted in there as selective replacement of the tile. Obviously, when we're rebuilding the pool gutters, that would all be new tile that goes back on there. And then 3 feet down, I think, from the pool edge, we assumed new finish for that scenario. And then the modernization scenario assumes full replacement of interior finishes, all new tile throughout, as you've mentioned. In terms of the chlorine replacement with a different system, we just went by the recommendation of AME Group. I hadn't heard that there was a desire to switch to a different system. Our recommendation from a mechanical consultant was that that system is very effective at delivering chlorine to a pool. If there are different systems desired, we would have to explore that further in the design development of one of these scenarios.
Thank you. As I said, I don't know what that is, but I'm just reading the email. So thank you for that response. Sorry to put you on the spot on that. And thank you. I was referring, I did see that you're renovating the mid-part area, but there is offices in the pool area. That was the ones I was referring to. Yeah. Director Boyko.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So if we're going to open a can of worms and start unearthing all the underground piping that leads in and out of the building, we're going to have to set a very strong battery limit of the building envelope, so that if we're going to get support from the regional districts to help fund a city-owned facility, and we find out that the pipes on 10th Avenue and Wallace Street, wherever else they go, are all broken over 60 years or have problems, that we're not going to continue to expand our funding for city-owned infrastructure at infinity to wherever they go. Set a strong battery limit. This is where the project is. Anything else is out of the scope. And with regard to costs, we need to keep this low, or else this thing will not proceed. There's a pretty strong public sentiment in the valley right now about public spending and government expenditures, and adding extra tile and anything like that is nice and pretty, but if it doubles the cost, no one's going to want that. Thank you.
Director Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just appreciate the information you brought forward from the city's facility manager and the CAO. Just wondering if we could get the group here and our facilities manager to meet at least and talk about that, because obviously they have some questions and we can't answer them here, but it would be nice to have the experts talk to the experts.
Is that included in the scope, or to talk to city facilities?
I think for today, what we want to do is receive the report, and then if the board is willing to proceed, the next steps and outside of this is we have an apportionment model report that's coming in February as well. And then at that point, if the board is willing to proceed towards some sort of referendum, then yes, we are planning on pulling all staff together. We'd probably also recommend having a joint meeting with the full Port Alberni Mayor and Council, just to make sure that we're clear on the expectations of advancing to a referendum question, whatever that question might include or entail, right? So there's a lot for us to unpack. And I think if we needed HCMA at any point in that discussion, we would reach out and coordinate appropriately. But for now, it really is about receiving this step, understanding the numbers so that we have a true comparison. And I think the report achieves that. Obviously, there'll be many nuances that we'd have to navigate through, and that would be up to ACRD staff working with city staff per the direction of both elected bodies.
I have thrown this out a couple of times before, but my preference is to our version of that $68 million pool, it was beautiful, but it is the Cadillac version. There's lots of things that we could take off and scale back and have a brand new pool. I feel that all we're doing with this renovation is that saying is putting lipstick on a pig. However, having a renovated pool is better than having no pool. And I think we also have to consider if we go with the renovated pool, we need to ensure that we're putting money in reserves. So in 20 years, we have some funding to build a new pool. And we have to be very careful about just saying, well, we'll just pass it off the next generation. They can pay for it. It is our responsibility as well. So that's my comment. Is there any more comments? Dr. Jack.
Yeah, I'm broadly in support of that whole approach that you're saying. I do think that this is something that we need to look at. A renovation could be a stopgap measure, but it's kicking the can down the line. And honestly, things are always getting more expensive. So I know that this is intimately connected to apportionment and all of that sort of thing. But it's a swimming pool. People need to learn how to swim, and it's not always going to be in the river or at a beach or something like that. So with that in mind, though, just moving us along, I'll move to receive the report if it hasn't been done already. Thanks.
Moved by Director Jack, seconded by Director Neely. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Is there any more questions or comments when we have the experts here? Director Boyko.
Yeah, thank you. Just to your comment recently about the $68 million pool, the latest estimate was 99 million, just so everyone's clear on the total there. Thank you.
That was the actual cost of the pool, where I want to tear it down to maybe make it down to 40 million. I think that can be very attainable. So you're absolutely right. I was not including inflation or projections for the future.
Thank you.
Director Sparrow.
Thank you. I have one question. We have two estimates for us, 13 million, 16 million. Do you want to make a recommendation to the staff which one we'd like to pick now, or do you want to leave it as is and move forward with both of them, just to confuse the staff even more in the future?
Well, this is the delegation. Michael didn't have an opportunity to speak to his report, which is on the agenda after the delegation. I would recommend that we wait until the report. If you want to make any recommendation, you're welcome to do so. I just simply want to flag that the apportionment discussion, which is an important part to moving forward, is for the future. And we're going to take this information and tie it into that as examples. And two, just a reminder that staff are still operating under the premise that we are looking to talk about a regional service, and that what everyone had agreed on in doing so is that we were either all in or all out. And so this discussion, yes, needs to happen, and wherever we can get agreement, let's take that agreement and store it away as we move forward.
Any final questions or comments? Thank you very much for coming today. I know this was a huge amount of work. As I said, it's a big document. I'm still trying to wade through it all. So thank you so much. I'm sure there'll be questions in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we didn't vote on the motion, did we? Yes, we did. Yeah. Yeah, just we have a motion on the floor to receive the report.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next is request for decision Parks Volunteer Program. That would be Michael. Thank you for waiting all this time. Oh, okay.
Aquatics feasibility.
Okay.
So we just had the
Okay. So 7A, aquatics renovation feasibility. Michael, please go ahead. Even though we've already
Yeah, thank you. And I don't have, brand new information to share here. This report just summarized, the process of developing the renovation scenario, and then also tied in the 2022 new build scenario as well. So nothing new for me to highlight. I just want to kind of identify, why we did it. Under the direction of the board last year, they directed staff to explore the renovation alternative to constructing a new aquatic facility. And first we did phase one, where we did a full investigation into the condition of the existing Echo Pool facility, and then we looked at two separate scenarios. So the life extension, to summarize, is to just extend the life of that for 20 years by doing the needed replacements, not a lot of beautification or unneeded improvements as well. And then we also looked at the modernization scenario, where we do all those life extension and then a little bit of beautification and use improvements as well. So that's what you're getting for those two scenarios. I think it's been mentioned a couple of times, but that 15-month shutdown, there's going to be staffing implications there, where we have to retrain and we kind of lose the pipeline of lifeguards during that process. So I'd say by comparison, the 2024 new facility, you get the Cadillac version, as Director Haggard had mentioned, new aquatic center, modern amenities. It's identified with a leisure wave pool, 25-meter lap pool, wellness spaces, multi-purpose rooms, universal change rooms, with a higher cost, of course. So Daniel had mentioned the next steps, where we're having that apportionment discussion in February here. That's a major portion of this, but the goal is a referendum for a service in the fall. So February will be an important month for determining the question that would bring forward. And then when we discussed service creation earlier today too, that there's a big portion of developing the information and the communication program to bring that forward. Thanks.
Director Cote?
Thank you. I'm just recalling the airport project, and our referendum was for $8 million, and that was all we could spend. There was no more money to tap into. So the estimates that we've got here, would that be the numbers that we would bring forward for a referendum? And then we're talking about extra costs. Where would we be if we agreed to a certain amount and then the cost rose? Because I think that the costs are too low in the estimate. I really don't think that that's all it's going to cost. So I don't want to be halfway through a project and realize that we don't have the funds. Thank you.
I agree. I also think the costs are a little bit light. Daniel?
Well, I think the costs are clearly articulated, and we use the right experts to help us identify those costs. Are there other unexpecteds? Maybe, and that's what Class D also identifies by adding the additional contingency. I think with regard to a referendum question, that is we're not prepared to jump into that one today. We'll bring some discussion forward around apportionment. However, there are a number of ways which we could advance the questions. And I think that ultimately, foundationally, there will be two questions. One, do we want the service? Yes or no? And two, how much money are we putting into service to achieve something? If we're saying, and we can set that number, what is the upper threshold that we're looking to do, and move forward from there. So, for example, if we were to go with these numbers and say, look, you build in negotiations with the city, because at the end of the day, we can't really advance with a renovation on a building that's not ours. So there'd be some negotiations with the city. There might either be a low-cost lease all the way to a full market value purchase. And so how would we factor in those costs? So if we put that in, if we did add some additional things that we might think of through discussion that we want to make sure we're not missing, but I'll use round numbers. If we said 20 million and we put 20 million into the service, then that would be the other question. That ultimately the budget that we're functioning with is 20 million, and we'll carry that vision through to where it is. So both would have to happen. You would need the service to be entered into, that the public agrees, and then you'd need the money to act. If either one of those doesn't move forward, then the whole thing really doesn't go anywhere. It's of no use for the city to know that Sprout Lake is willing to have them borrow 20 million. And they've already been very clear that we're either all in or all out. So that's a non-starter, and vice versa. there's no point in having a service with no money or an ability to go get that money. So there's a lot of dialogue, and this is why Michael correctly identified February is very important because we need to clearly identify and articulate the parameters of the questions that we're willing to ask in each one of our communities in a consistent, systematic way. Then we need to back up and create all of those communication pieces to get out to the public as soon as possible so the public can get a first glance, chew on it, digest it a little, ask questions back, because there's going to have to be a back and forth in each one of the communities. So like if we're thinking about a referendum, it could be that Cherry Creek has way more questions and they want a town hall meeting because that's useful and they'll host one. But other areas are just like, no, we're good. We have the information we want and we'll tag along in some other. But we're going to need some sort of communication forum before that deadline of no more new information, and off we go. So there's a lot of work in this that needs to be considered, and you're asking the right questions. I just don't have the answers today.
Yeah, so I'm looking down the road. Also, my community is asking for a incorporation study, which would change the boundaries for Sprout Lake. And if they're tied into an agreement for the pool, how would that affect the community? And would they be at that point, because they're a new entity, would they be able to establish a new agreement?
So if you were to become your own municipality, your boundary would likely be dangerously similar to the current boundary that you have for Sprout Lake. The way that a letters patent adjustment would occur is that all your existing commitments under the regional district would be transferring over. So you don't get an automatic exit to all the services. You're actually still part of them, but you're in as a municipality as opposed to a rural area. And this is where there's you're scratching at the surface of many questions. I'm giving you an oversimplified answer because it's not the subject of what we're looking at today, but there are many elements that we would have to make sure we're legally verifying, confirming, and making sure that the absolute correct answer is provided to the public based on the question, right? Because some questions are sort of, you don't necessarily realize where it's going, and we need to do our due diligence. So I apologize for the oversimplification, but that is my quick answer on it is, and obviously that would be part of the process to exploring incorporation.
Any other questions or comments? Perfect. We'll move on to Parks Volunteer Program. We did it already.
Thank you. So this report dives into how other municipal governments manage their volunteering programs on parks and trails. This is under direction from the board from November meeting. So after direction from the board in November, staff consulted with staff of other 7 regional districts and municipal governments in the area and of similar size in the province. The goal is to review their policies, their staff involvement, training approaches, and methods for addressing unauthorized work. So after that review, 4 distinct models of volunteer management somewhat emerged, grouping these organizations in each model. And they range from like a highly formal staff managed program to like a fully informal program. And the ACRD is the only one that was surveyed currently operating under a fully informal model. The 4 identified models identified in the report. Category 1 would be a formal staff managed program, and that's where staff have a structured oversight with policies and pretty much maintain a volunteer roster of individuals in the community. They provide training. It's very resource intensive, but it provides consistency and safety. These are generally larger organizations than the ACRD. So category 2 would be a formal community group managed program. This is where community groups would operate under agreement with guidance from an adopted policy framework. And this balances, stewardship and oversight. And this is the recommendation for the ACRD to pursue. Category 3 is when there be individual contracts. So these are just case-by-case agreements, and they offer flexibility, but there's lower consistency and a little bit of higher risk there than Category 2. And then Category 4 is informal model. There's minimal oversight. There's lots of high flexibility, but there's safety and liability concerns, as well as it doesn't tie into an asset management program very well. So the recommendation would be for staff to pursue a Category 2 framework, which would see a policy brought forward to the board to oversight agreements with community groups, with the goal of maintaining efficiency and community ownership. Happy to answer questions on this.
Thank you for the report, Director Boyko.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the research. So we did a lot of community engagement 2 years ago, and we had a lot of feedback on how the public wants to look after the trail. What was their recommendation?
I think if you could, like in the Loch Train Trail Management Plan, we talked about, future, resource needs for the trail and the current setup with volunteer management. I think a lot of people, wanted to continue having the ability to volunteer in a way that provided or kept the trail accessible to the public. And then I think that, Category 2 would offer that opportunity.
Category 2, okay. So you mentioned here that if we go with keeping it at informal, number 4, where people go at their own cost and just fix the trail, which they've been doing for decades. How many complaints have we actually had on the trail? And then I got 2 more questions after that.
So complaints that we get, I think we generally get about 5 complaints a year for people complaining about, infrastructure needs or an incident on the trail. We've had, 2 bridges collapse with people on them in the last 2 years, which poses a big risk and liability concern, and dedicates a number of staff time to address those complaints and incidents. And that's a very reactive way to manage a trail. I think the goal would be to identify those needs prior to an infrastructure failure, and utilize volunteer work where possible to ensure that we don't have an incident.
Okay. Second to last question here. I asked for a feedback on what an engineered asset is, because this is going to come very clearly into what it is. So UBCM says engineered assets are intentional design, engineering standards, and purpose-built functionality, as opposed to a man-made asset. And are we saying what assets out here that we're looking at with this trail policy are actually engineered assets? We were supposed to get something back a month ago about this.
Sorry, I don't remember seeing the motion on, bringing back more information on that. But, I think our asset management policy and how I've interacted with it has identified or split it up into natural assets and engineered assets. So not specifically designed and constructed by an engineer, but any human built asset, like you said. So one could look at it where there's 3 different categories where you have natural assets, human built assets, and engineered assets, if that's the way that other people see it as well. But I think having the definition in our asset management program would be something that we could pursue.
I would think we would need to define that very quickly here, because when we pass that we're going to look after engineered assets, we can't just say everything on that trail is an engineered asset, full blanket statement, every creek, bridge, culvert, whatever it is out there. Because some of the things our bridges is a log and then some dirt against it. And I'm not going to say that's an engineered asset to put time into. But that being said, I do not want the public hindered from going out there and doing work. So when we had the bomb cyclone year and 3 months ago, that trail had hundreds of trees across it, and it was cleared by volunteers in a week and a half. no involvement from the ACRD whatsoever. And people like that, they'll do it again, is their trail. Whatever we decide here, I want to make sure that we do not restrict the ability of the people to go fix their own trail. Thank you.
Director Cote?
Thank you. Through the chair, with all due respect, these are not the people's trails. They're an asset of the regional, they're a child of the regional district, and we need to look after them. I think that this policy is designed to cover not just the log train trail, but all trails, all parks. Putting on my MIA hat, I disapprove of option 4. I think that we are leaving ourselves quite open to liability issues. I do like number 2. I think that if we move forward in designing a program where there's some training, there's some objectives out there as to what is expected from the community. Yes, you can go work, but there needs to be some kind of oversight from the ACRD, because it's important that we at least show that we're making that stab to make sure that the people are safe out there when they're volunteering. Sprout Lake has a couple of parks. They have trail system, and working with the volunteers and those, we have a formal parks commission. So working with those people there, and they want to do volunteer work. I think that having some kind of a risk management policies and when we need to put contracts in place or agreements, that we can do that and we have a policy to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Siga.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was triggered as well by the It's Our Trail, and we've been clearing it for 20 years as well. That sort of puts people who are clearing the trail in the mind framework of we can manage this, and it isn't meant to be like, if ACRD is to be involved in the trail, it is the responsibility of the ACRD, and it is a public asset, as Penny pointed out. And having been on, the liability issue is really big. It was pointed out that they have like 5 complaints a year. It could be potentially very disastrous for ACRD if we were brought to court on liability issues around the trail. And having been involved in an organization, an environmental organization whose mandate was to support trail rehabilitation and stabilize banks, we had our own liability insurance. And when we went out as volunteers, we were very aware that we were covered by that liability. And the protections that we got were that every project had knowledgeable people and engineers on site to give us direction. And that was through our volunteer organization. That was not through the city. So I just think we have to be very careful in what we're putting ourselves up for. I don't think I think if an organization is going to have volunteers, it should have a clear mandate. It should have, it should be a registered society. Otherwise, I'd be really uncomfortable with just this whole idea that anybody can go out and do what they want, and we are liable for it. I just had to comment on that perspective.
Thank you. Of Director Boyko, Director Sparrow, then Director Roth. Please go ahead, Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. The public owns all Crown land and everything. So when I say a statement like we own the trail, the public owns the trail. The public owns the ACRD. The public's paying for everybody to sit here and talk right now, right? We can never forget that the public is here and we own the thing. Just full stop. Secondly, I don't want to have a mechanism come up that says, Buddy went up there, cut down a tree, and then, nope, he didn't get approval to do that. We're gonna go put the tree back and then have a meeting and then take the tree down again. We need to be smart about how this is gonna done, how this will happen. And for reference, I want any vote coming out of this decision to be recorded as well. Thank you.
Daniel?
Can I ask just for clarity, Director Boyko? So I don't disagree with you, but is there something in the staff recommendation that would indicate that that's what we're looking to create? Because what you're expressing is just an act of unreasonableness, and so in the creation of a policy, I'm just not sure what indication staff have provided where that would be our recommended approach.
Stopping unauthorized work in trails that does not meet established standards. Unauthorized works in decommissioning trails that do not meet established standards. Everything like this, all this wording like unauthorized work, policies, blah, blah, blah. If people up here, like you gotta remember we're remote here, right? This isn't Sprout Lake where you can drive to the trail. A lot of this is spread out. You can only get to it by either walking, bicycle, horse, quad, ATV, whatever. You carry a chainsaw with you because half the time you're going to file a tree across the road. People are just going to cut down the tree and carry on with their day. We need to encourage that and keep that going because that's what people have been doing and we want to keep that going. Thank you.
And could a policy not achieve that in terms of identifying that that it is an authorized use to clear trees off?
Yeah, but there's nothing in here that says that. It says unauthorized work. You need to have ability for people to fix things on themselves. If you're going down the hump and there's a tree across the road that's this big, you're going to pick it up and get it out of the way and keep going. You're not going to wait for MOTT to get there. You know, if it's this big, that's a whole other animal.
Yes, and I again, I'm agreeing, and I just like, could we not achieve that clarity through policy? I guess is my question.
We certainly can, but when you say things like excludes unaffiliated volunteers creating barriers, that's a con of number 2. All right. Unless you say that everybody that lives out here is an affiliated volunteer, then how do you recognize that fact? You say, oh, you're not part of this group or whatever. You're not allowed to go up there and fix it. You're going to get the public to not follow any of this ad anyways.
Okay, that noted. And I would still say that that would be in the definitions of a policy that we can identify and communicate out.
Thank you.
Director Sparrow, then Director Roth. Please go ahead, Director Sparrow.
Thank you for that. I know where Director Boyko was trying to go with this, and I'll put some history back into this from firefighting point of view. I mean, I can go back far enough in firefighting that if you were by a fire, you could legally grab somebody, put them on a hose, and put them against the building. Legally, no training. That happened in town here, a few fires, long time ago, until the wall fell on the people, and we had to end up pulling them out and pulling out the people. So now there is rules in place. You just don't pick guys off the street and throw them against a fire because of liability and because of insurance. And this is progressing through everything. I know where Director Boyko wants to go with this, and you can. And you can do this, but the people have to recognize if they want to cut down a tree with a chainsaw, even fallers have to go every 2 years to get recertified on how to use a chainsaw, even though it's their livelihood, they do it every day. Director Boyko's industry, it is regulated for a reason. So same thing with this, we're getting to a point of regulation. We had a bunch of volunteers and they were doing the trails. And the problem is the liability insurance for the volunteers got too high. A lot of them gave up because they couldn't afford to pay for the insurance to do the job. Here, the regional district is taking the liability on through training and through signing documents that they know they're trained, and the liability goes on the regional district, so the individual does not need that insurance. So if you want to use your chainsaw cut down trees, I don't see a problem with that if you go through the process and then you're recognized. So we can do both. But you just want to say, I don't want to go to the process, I want to cut down a chainsaw, and you get hurt, you're going to have to sue somebody because you need money to live. And it has been done before, and it was done again, where people get hurt and they'll have to sue because they have no choice. We the people, and through this board, administer the Log Train Trail. And we have a responsibility to the people, all the people, for being insured. So if you want to go and work on the Log Train Trail, and I got people that have already signed up that want to do it this year, so work on the trails, they will go through the process so they don't have to pay liability insurance, and they can do the process. But it is a process. And to kick back against the process, saying I'm gonna do it anyway, then you're creating a liability. And I don't think we should be doing that. We can do both. Firefighters now have to be trained to a certain level, and they have the responsibility of telling the chief, if they can't train, not to do what they're being asked to do. And the same with here. If you're not trained to do it, you should not do it. So I'm going to go like with the recommendation of number 2, but also I want to see number 3, individual contract. People have certain skill sets they can bring as an individual and sign off on that too. So we can use this document, save the money on the liability side, and get the volunteers doing what they want to do. Because I got people waiting to do things, and we get this in place, they can do it. So I understand your point of view. Let us do what we want to do, but by the same token, you could get in a situation where you could get hurt and you end up having to sue somebody because that's the only avenue of income you're going to have. Thank you.
Dr. Roth?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say and agree with others that the people are the ACRD, that all funding comes from the people. And if there's an organizational chart, it would show that the people are at the top of the organizational chart, and then the ACRD staff would fall underneath it. So that needs to be very clear. Also, I'd like to know, have there ever been any liability issues related to the Log Train Trail in the past? Like, has anyone sued? Because it's been going on for a lot of years.
I'm not aware of a legal proceeding. No.
Thank you. Director Siga?
Thanks again. Yeah, I have ridden my bike on the Log Train Trail. The ruts and the mud that were left behind by motorized vehicles certainly did not make me feel like it was usable by bicycles. And like we did have an incident where there was a fall, not reported, of course, because obviously this was a motorized trail. And I just think that by not being on top of the liability issue and only having either a registered nonprofit accepting the liability to work on the trail, or the ACRD having an approved method of using volunteers to manage the trail, I think we're just opening a can of worms and asking for a suit to happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Boyko.
Thank you very much. So my question is about the lease with the province and the assets themselves, and then I'll talk about something else. But when I am a leaseholder of a property and the landlord is someone, they're in charge of the assets, like the building and bridges and things like that. How does that actually work with our contract, or is there nothing in there about that?
Michael?
Just going from memory, but I think that the term of the lease that was signed in the early 90s is that we'd be responsible of returning it to original condition if we were to hand the lease back. So I take any improvements done by the ACRD or during the lease term would be considered ACRD property, and then I don't know what the province would do if we were to hand back, but they could enforce that term of the agreement for removal of assets in that case.
But is there something in there that says who is responsible for maintaining any assets?
I'd have to look at the specific agreement to see the language on that.
Can you email it to all of us when you have a minute, please?
Yeah, I can hand that up.
Appreciate it. So if we're going to ask people to go through some kind of training, what would that actually look like? Are we going to train people how to use a chainsaw? Are we going to give them a vest and get them to do this every 2 years? Like, I heard that fallers need to do, and I don't know if that's correct or not, but what would be involved with that? And are we, and if Director Sparrow says he has people ready to work on the trail, are they gonna go up and down all 22 kilometers of it, or are they just gonna do the Cherry Creek portion? Because most of this is in the Beaufort X area. Thank you.
Well, I'd say that, identifying the framework there, number one is more specific about the ACRD hosting, formal training events. If we were to pursue number two or number three, establishing training or expectations would be identified in the agreements, and we could hand off the role of training specific individuals to those community groups, and just as long as there's an agreement on direction of standards looking to be achieved.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Director Cote, and then Director Coots.
Thank you. This is not just for the log train trail. So there's been work done on the inlet trail in the past, two sections, first and second, where they had volunteers go in and develop this trail. Those people had supervision, and there was a plan. So that work was done. The volunteers continue to go out there. They've had that training in the past. So, and the policies, and they know what to do. So that would be like, there doesn't have to be a major, you can't touch anything until you get approval from the regional district. That's not what this is intended. The intent is here. It's to create a policy so that our liability issues are covered. And there used to be annual log train trail or whatever trail cleanups, and there's a lot of groups, hiking groups, that would go out and would clean up the trails. There's equestrian groups that go out and clean up backcountry, and they make sure that their people are covered liability wise and have the proper training, because you really don't want to be sending anybody out there to get hurt. So I support number 2, and I'd like to make a motion if I could.
Please go ahead.
I'd like to move that the Committee of the Whole recommend that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors direct staff to develop a volunteer management framework for parks and trails aligning with Category 2, a formal community group managed program. Thank you.
It's moved by Director Cote, and you're seconded, Director Sparrow.
I am, but if I make an amendment to it, and category 3 for individual groups, if they have special skill sets, that it says here groups as opposed to individuals. So, hear that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you'd like a recorded vote, Director Roth?
Yes, please, a recorded vote.
Okay, thank you. Director Boyko, you had a comment?
Yes. One of my comments is going to be regarding, how do I want to say this? This will apply to all trails, but I don't know if that's the right way to do this. All trails are not the same, and this log train trail is not going to be paved. It's going to be done, and it's going to be motorized. It's not going to have the same level of visibility to everybody because it's way out in the bush. But that being said, I don't know if we should have one thing apply to all trails or if we should do it, but there's going to be something coming up where we talk about Sprout Lake Incorporation study and delaying certain things. I would actually support delaying this from this year's work to support the Sprout Lake Incorporation study and delay this till next year, this decision. Thank you.
Director Coots.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair, this is a question for Michael. I am just curious and wanting to confirm all of the provided options do currently and likely in the future, as we know, no one has a crystal ball, but all of these will continue to fall correctly under RAPPER, the riparian area protection regiments and regimes and so on and so forth. As we have stated many times, this isn't focused on one trail. So logically, it would therefore continue to cover the potential buildings of new trails. As we know, living on Vancouver Island, especially within our own area, many of these potential future trails and existing trails will have connections to salmon-bearing streams. And these are things that we need to think about and always have in the focus of our minds. I don't disagree with a lot of the comments that Director Boyko has come forward with. I do believe and support the fact that volunteer-based projects like this are always amazing. You always want to be promoting a community that has pride in their community and where they are. I just don't want to support any option that may put us into potential further issues along those lines. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. Through the chair. So I think that's what a category 2 would do well, is identifying that riparian area regulations and expectations for volunteers doing work on ACRD property. And then that would also be, an education moment for that, because a lot of these trail volunteers, they don't just do work on one trail, they do work on many trails around the region too. So, having a better understanding for the volunteers in the community about, what those riparian area regulations are and what the expectations are would be a good outcome of a category 2 option.
Thank you. Director Roth? I agree with Director Boyko in that perhaps we should have different policies for different parks and trails. And what came to my mind is the horse riding rings in a park in Beaver Creek. It can be very dangerous. And that's under the ACRD, that park. Like, how does liability work there? How is it handled there? And that's very different from other things. So I think that putting them all together actually doesn't make sense. So there needs to be different policies for different areas. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's good identification that, we do have volunteers that perform work in Evergreen Park on the horse riding ring and, grading and raking the sands and fixing the fencing and whatnot. But I think that's a little bit different than the users utilizing that ring too. So this type of policy wouldn't apply to users, just specifically the volunteers, doing the work for the ACRD to offset other maintenance costs too. So I think that agreements under this framework could be specifically tailored for that use or for trail construction or trail maintenance uses, just depending on the inclination of that group itself.
Just to follow up. So does that mean if, say someone fell or hurt themselves on a horse, so there's no liability to the ACRD? Like, how is that handled? Because that could easily happen or maybe has happened.
Yeah, without a doubt, when people are utilizing our infrastructure for potentially dangerous uses, and there's an expectation that the infrastructure is safe, then there is liability there. So we address that liability through policy like this, or through established maintenance standards to show that we are not being negligent and we're doing what's needed to make sure that the infrastructure is to be used as intended and is safe.
Any final questions or comments? Director Cote?
Thank you. I'd just like to say, very similar to Horse Ring, Sprout Lake Park has a bike skills park. There's a part of our policy is to make sure that it's maintained annually. The kids are gonna use the park and it gets deteriorated, but there's talks about keeping records and making sure that there's a record of what the maintenance is. And I think that really helps out for our liability. If someone cuts down a tree or whatever, but it's reported, if people understand that there needs to be a record of what's going on, then it really helps for our liability. Thanks.
Okay, seeing no further questions, I'm going to call the motion, and because this is a recorded vote, I would ask that you please keep your hand up until you call your name. All in favor of the motion? Director Sparrow, Director Cote, Director Mealy, Director Haggard, Director Johnson, Director McEwen, Director Siga, and Director Beckett, Director Mustangelo. Oh, are you voting for now?
My apologies. I was just hoping for a point of clarification. This is with the amendment for category 3.
Yes.
Thank you.
And all against the motion? Director Roth, Director Coots, and Director Boyko. Motion is passed. Thank you very much, everyone, for the discussion. No late business. Is there any questions online, Cynthia?
So we have no one here in the gallery, no questions received through Zoom, and none through the email.
We need a motion to close the meeting to the public as per the community charter. For section 91D, a part of the regional district meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one or more of the following: the security of the property of the regional district. Moved by Director Mealy, second by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? I'd like to